J. Brooks Jewelers is passionate about your life's celebrations. This time of year, we like to celebrate the women in our lives. Jewelry has the power to represent someone we love or a memory that we cherish. At J. Brooks, we are committed to finding you those pieces that you will treasure for generations to come.
Welcome to the I Am Mom Summit. I'm Leigh, and my topic today is how to be okay on the inside no matter what's happening on the outside. For the next 25 minutes or so, we're going to go a little bit deeper into what that means. We're going to look at 5 things that take us away from being able to feel that okay on the inside, and 5 things that can help us get back to feeling okay on the inside, including maybe looking at an example or 2. And then we're going to spend just a little bit of time going a bit deeper on one of the strategies that we'll discuss and give you an exercise that you can try at home to build this skill. But first, let me tell you just a little bit about myself. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, which means I'm a psychotherapist, and I've been working with women and couples and children and families for 30 years. I'm also the founder of TakeCareOfMom.com, and this website is where I have taken all my experience, especially working with women, and put it into what I call the resiliency system, which is a set of pillars of particular skills and strategies that each woman can use to be able to increase the joy and confidence in her life. Now, these pillars are incredible skill sets in and of themselves, but what makes the resiliency system really special is that it builds upon each pillar. They interact with each other to create this really awesome system that gives women everything that they need to be able to function with confidence and a real strong sense of peace in their lives. I'm also a mom of 5 kids, which is important because this is a mom summit and we're learning from moms. And the reason why I think being a mom has been so influential for me is that it has given me incredible compassion and empathy for what my clients experience, what the women experience that I work with, because I've been there. I know what it's like. I also know what it feels like to apply these skills, these resiliency skills and principles to my own life, and I know that they work. So I'm excited to share that with you. So let's get started. What does it mean to be okay on the inside when things aren't going well on the outside? Well, basically what we're talking about is the difference between internal and external control. Most of the time, we have a sense that things that are going wrong around us are the cause of why we don't feel strong inside, or maybe even why we're upset inside. What I want every mom to understand is that our goal is to have a sense of internal control, no matter what's happening externally. You know, in therapy sessions, I've got people that come in, and in coaching sessions when I work with women, we talk about all of the issues that are coming up, the problems, the stresses, the crises, and it's so easy to chase crisis after problem after issue after external problems and try to get those solved so that we can feel okay. What I learned early on is that if we can understand that the ability is within us to be okay no matter what's going on outside of us, we have tapped into a power that is phenomenal, because the truth is we really can't control what goes on outside of us. And if you've tried to do that with your 3-year-old, you've tried to do that with your teenager, or even your husband, it just doesn't work. But what does work is being able to control what's going on inside. And control is a loose word. I don't mean that we tamp it down and we control, but to be in touch with it and know how to work with it, that's the beginning of knowing how to be okay on the inside. And all of that circles around being able to have this kind of sense of confidence, of calm, of knowing within your core wisdom, your inner wisdom. I often call that home base. It's that place where you're centered, where you know, I kind of know what to do here. I can trust my wisdom on this. And I really believe that all of us have this inner wisdom that we come with. It's your preset. And when you can't find it, it's not because it's not there. It's not because you never had it, for sure. It's always there. It's always been there. But especially when we chase external circumstances, it's so easy to walk away from it and to lose sight of it. And over time, we can even wonder where it is. So our goal, what I want for every woman, is to feel so much stronger in her sense of knowing where she is centered, being able to go inward to solve the problem instead of outward. So your inner balance system is another way that I can kind of call this. This inner wisdom is waiting there for you. And I want you to be thinking about the last time that you experienced it, when you were able to just kind of have this knowing. I think I know what I need to do. And how that feels to be able to trust yourself, to be able to walk into a hard situation and say, I've got this. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know I'm going to show up and I know I'm going to be okay because I'm resilient. And that's why we call it the resiliency system. All of the things we're talking about today builds this ability to be able to bounce back when we have trouble. And I think that it's so important for us to recognize that we are not trying to live in this state of like perpetual glorious happiness all the time, because that's just not realistic. Everybody's going to have hard days and hard times. And if you're a mom, it's not just once in a while. It's going to be a large portion of your day because you have little people that you are in charge of and that you are trying so hard to train and love and protect, and you have really not so much control over it. I know we think we have lots of control. We have some, but when we start to get frustrated, it's because we're living with that kind of truth that we don't have control over anything but what's inside of us. So I want you to remember that this is what we're talking about. This is your home base. This is your birthright. And if you don't feel connected to it yet, that's okay, because you're going to get connected to it. And if you can remember when you have been connected to it, I'm excited for you, because that's your clue of what you're looking for. So what takes us away from this? If it's our preset, how come we just don't feel it all the time? And so let's talk about 5 things that get in our way. One of them is that we are out of touch with ourselves. And when we're out of touch with ourselves, we don't have a sense of kind of how to get to our home base. It's so easy to get overwhelmed. And the first thing that we can notice is that our body gets kind of on fire. We start to have our heart rate go up and our breathing go crazy. And that's when we start to lose our temper or get really emotional and say things we don't normally want to say, and or not show up like we want to show up. So that gets in the way. Comparing ourselves and being self-critical, man, that takes us away from being able to trust in our inner wisdom, because we are standing in the way with criticism for that. We get caught in cycles of negativity in our thinking, and that's just part of being human. It's not something wrong with us, but our thoughts create our feelings, and when we have thoughts that are negative, we are going to have negative feelings, and that can feel really out of control. We also get depleted. Our bodies get really tired. We don't get enough sleep. We don't have enough nutrition. And because we live in this vehicle, which is our body, when it is not working in an optimal way, we have a really hard time being able to access the wisdom that's inside of us. And finally, we just get overwhelmed by the stressors that are in our life, particularly with all the boundaries that got crossed and having a hard time knowing when to say yes and no, and often saying yes when we really don't want to. So there are ways to address every single one of these problems. And the ways that I've identified, I call the pillars in the resiliency system. And these are the things that bring you back home to your inner wisdom. The first one is self-awareness. And we talked about, one of the problems is that we get out of touch with what we're thinking and what we're feeling and how our body is reacting until it's too late. It's kind of like a rocket, like blasting off into the atmosphere. By the time you realize that you're about to blow, so much has happened beneath your awareness if your self-awareness is low. And so what we try to do with self-awareness is pay closer attention to the kinds of feelings that are happening in our body, and to recognize that our feelings are coming from our thoughts, and maybe just start to hear those thoughts a little bit. Not even work with them, just start to hear them, and to be able to do that from a place of objectivity. The second pillar that we use in helping women get back to their inner wisdom is self-compassion. And self-compassion is being able to treat yourself with kindness and respect, and not get really harsh and critical when you notice that things aren't going the way you want them to go, or that you're not thinking or feeling the way that you want to feel. And that's why it comes right after self-awareness, because sometimes when we notice, oh my gosh, look at what I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm starting to get really upset, then that, critical voice comes in and says, what's wrong with you? Gosh, you can't do this, you're blowing it, which increases all of your stress, makes your body get more upset. And it's that vicious cycle that kind of shuts you down instead of opens you up. So self-compassion is really, really important. The next pillar that we apply is self-talk. And self-talk is where we really identify, what are the things I'm thinking about what's going on around me? This is where we start to go a little bit deeper into that internal control. And it's where we look at our expectations. It's look at where we look at our mindset, like what is our philosophy about how we're supposed to be doing? So much to go into in self-talk. And once again, I'm just racing through these, and I hope you know that there are just tons of information and steps to being able to apply this and make it really make sense. So don't worry if it's like it's going too fast. Don't stress about that, because with a little bit more time and effort, you'll get it. But I just wanted to review it quickly because we don't have a lot of time, so I'm just scratching the surface. The third pillar that I always have women check and look at is, where am I in my self-care? And when I talk about self-care in this sense, I'm talking about their physical self-care. Are they tired? Like, can you hold it together like you normally hold it together when you've only had 4 or 5 hours sleep? I cannot. I lose my cool way faster when I'm tired, or if I'm hungry or hangry, right? And you see it in your kids. You see it when they're tired and they're hungry and like they can't hold it together. Well, we are just the same. So that's one of the pillars that we have to really pay attention to, and one of the things that we use to get back to our inner wisdom. And sometimes we look at that from a preventative standpoint, and sometimes we look at it as something we need to apply right in that moment, like, I just really need to stop and go get something to eat right now. And the last pillar is self-protection. And this has just a little bit more to do with some of those external stresses that we experience and how we can manage them. It still focuses on our internal management of those things, though, and how we set better boundaries, and especially how we say yes with gladness and commitment and confidence, and no with the same kind of commitment and the same kind of confidence, so that we don't feel guilt. So let's go through just a short example of a woman that I've been working with who had an external stress and didn't feel okay on the inside. So this woman that I've been working with has been potty training her 3-year-old, and she's done an amazing job, and they've been doing potty training for about 3 weeks, and the first week or 2 went really well. She set her goal, she did some training, she was all prepared, and she set things aside so that she had full unfocused time, or fully focused time, to be able to spend with her 3-year-old, and he did amazing. And then this 3rd week came along and they started to get back to normal. She took more things on. He, everybody thought he just had the potty training thing down. And then she told me about a day in which he had 2 accidents, one right after another, and how upset it made her feel. Now, the reason why I want to use this example is because this is a woman who is a student of the resiliency system. She was able to notice what was happening in her body, and her heart rate was going up, and she was starting to get flustered, and she was starting to feel stressed, and she started to hear some of the thinking in her head. She was starting to be really critical of her son. She was starting to feel very frustrated with him. So there's the feeling, right? She started to feel almost this kind of unusual anger. And she noticed almost immediately that she started to feel bad about that, which made her feel worse. And then she started to feel the tears come. And she told me she went into her bedroom and closed the door because she didn't want her little guy to see that she was so upset that he had had an accident again, wet his pants. And she knew in her wisdom that it wasn't something he was doing on purpose, but she was away from her wisdom. She was just like all on fire emotionally and physically. And she knew she ran the risk of maybe losing her temper or saying something that would make him feel bad, which was not what she wanted to do because she knows he's only 3. And so she went into her room and she did some slow, deep breathing, which is what we do when our stress response gets high. And because she had self-awareness, she could sense what it was where it was happening in her body and what she needed to do. She then had some compassion for herself. And she said, I need to be able to give myself a minute to compose. And she walked through some of her thinking and understood, oh my gosh, I'm starting to take responsibility, feeling like I'm a bad mom, that my little kiddo has wet his pants 2 times in a row. And that really doesn't make sense. Like, I wouldn't think that if my sister told me that her 3-year-old on week 3 of potty training had 2 accidents in one day. And she noticed as she started working with her thoughts that her emotions started to come down. And as her emotions came down, her body started to calm down. And she recognized that she hadn't had a lot of sleep. And it was right around lunchtime and she was hungry. And that there were all sorts of reasons why she was getting upset. And not one of them was because she was a bad mom or that her son was a bad potty training student. She was able to get back to her inner wisdom, take a deep breath, and come up with a plan for how she was going to handle her situation. This mom had a very normal response to a frustrating situation, but she got to choose from the inside how to handle it because that boat had already sailed. He'd already had the accident. You can't control that. And she could only control how she felt about it. And this thing didn't have the power to ruin her day. So I think because she was able to give herself a little bit of self-compassion, she unlocked the door for her to be able to work through that emotion. And I know that's a small example. I know you all have plenty of small examples, but you have big examples too. I picked a small example on purpose because it's much less emotionally laden. It gives you a little bit of a better idea of how to apply this without getting a lot of yeah, but, right? Or what if this? So stay with me when we just talk about the concepts because these concepts work for tiny things and they work for massive things. And knowing them on a small level will build your muscles, your ability to do this for the big things. So let's talk about the thing that actually helped her get out of this, I think, the most. I mean, they're all, see how they build on each other? They all interact. You need them all. She had to have self-awareness to know what was going on with her. So we couldn't skip that. She needed her self-talk. She couldn't skip that. But I'm going to talk a little bit today about the self-compassion that she applied because she was able to get out of being critical of what a bad mom she was, that she had a child who wasn't fully potty trained at 3 weeks, and get to a place where she could live with the circumstances that was going on and be able to move forward and kind of come out of it and get back to herself. So let's talk about self-compassion. What is self-compassion? Self-compassion is the ability to be kind to yourself and compassionate to yourself like you would to other people. Do you remember how I said, would she say that to her sister? And the answer is probably not, because she would be able to be compassionate with her sister and say, oh my gosh, you're being way too hard on yourself. This is a 3-year-old. You can't control everything he does, and you're a great mom, and you're hanging in there, and you don't have to be perfect. And if you make mistakes, I love you anyway, right? We're good at giving compassion to other people. We're not so great at giving compassion to ourselves. We're good at comparing ourselves to other people, particularly the best in other people, against our worst. we're not good at giving ourselves permission to be ourselves and to figure it out and to have mistakes and to learn as we go. So self-compassion is something that we need to stay open and learn and grow and problem solve. And when we don't have it, it shuts us down and it takes us away from our inner wisdom. And it makes it very hard to be okay on the inside. I have some women say, okay, well, I am having a hard time being compassionate with other people too. And I will tell you, that causes women so much problem, so much worry. But I'm never worried when I hear a woman say that, because you are built to be compassionate. If you're finding it's hard to be compassionate with someone else, I know it's hard to be compassionate with ourselves, but if you're especially finding it hard to be compassionate with someone else, it's just because you're tired and you're depleted. And that's where the pillars come in too, right? When you don't have enough sleep, when you haven't had enough care and attention, our well gets dry. And all you need with a well is a little bit of water. It's such a great analogy, right? You prime a well by putting a little bit of water to get that water pumping out. When you can give yourself a little bit of self-care, a little bit of room to be imperfect and human, your compassion is going to come bubbling back. So don't worry if you don't feel like you can find it right away. It is there, I promise you. It's just that when we get tired, we don't feel like we have access to it. And then we beat ourselves up, right? And so what gets in the way of us being compassionate with ourselves? It's our inner critic. We all have an inner critic. She is that voice in our head that tells us what we're supposed to be doing, particularly when we're not doing it right. She has these expectations. Sometimes they're crazy. They're usually connected to comparison. So many women ask me, how can I love my mom life? I just want to be happier. Part of the problem, I think, why it's so hard, I remember asking that question too, because it's really hard. It's hard to be surrounded with so many people that we're taking care of. But part of what keeps us away from loving our mom life is the expectation that we have, the comparison that we have. And we have to stop that. Our inner critic is going to go there because our inner critic is a product of the negativity bias of our brain. And if you go to my website, you'll see that there's a brain document that you can sign up and just sign up with your email and we'll send it to you for free. It is a document that explains how your brain works and how sometimes it's trying to protect you, but when it has a negativity bias, it means that it's always looking for the things that are wrong to try to protect you, right? But when it's looking for things that are wrong all the time, it ends up being very critical. And so when I first understood this, that my inner critic was really powerful because of this, I was so able to just not listen to it and do something different. I know my inner critic is talking when I hear that kind of despair in my thinking and in my feeling, when I start to feel shame, when I start to feel not good enough. All of those things take us away from our core wisdom, our core of who we are. And, you are good enough. If you look at your little babies in the eyes when they're born, have you ever had a little baby, yours or anybody else's, where you've looked at them and said, oh, this one's a loser. This one's no good. Of course not. You are that little baby. You are just as valuable and important and whole as your child was the day your child was born, and all babies everywhere. We just grow and we just get all sorts of ideas in our mind, and our critic gets loud, and we just walk away from that. And there's a way to walk back to it. And the best way to do that is through self-compassion. So here's an exercise that I want to give you to be able to connect to that core wholeness, that core of who you are. And the best way I know, it's not the only way, but the best way I know to do that in a really kind of quick way is to imagine yourself as a little girl. And so the exercise involves you getting a photo of you when you were a child. And it's really important you choose a picture of you when you were at an age that I call before the threat of expectation. Like when you were 2 or 7 or, 4, you'll look at that little girl and go, well, she's only 4. Of course she doesn't know how to do everything perfectly. So make sure that you pick a photo of you when you're very young. If you choose one that's when you're too old, like when you're 14 or 16, it's really interesting how early we start in those teenage years, starting to have these expectations. And I think a lot of it has to do with comparison, right? When we start to become aware of peers. Social media makes this so hard, ladies, because we live in this world where we're always looking at how other people are doing. And it's part of staying connected. I think that part's awesome. But we have to be aware of how it opens up that inner critic to start to compare and to start to look at what might not be right with us. So don't pick a picture of you when you're like older. I want to have you pick a picture when you're younger. And I want you to put it up on your fridge or your mirror. Somewhere, it doesn't matter if other people see it. They'll just think you're doing, it's cute. You're putting your picture up. You can put everybody's picture up if you want. But I want you to walk by that picture every day, look in that little girl's eyes, and recognize that that is you still. And I want you to ask 3 questions. Who will love her? Who will take care of this little girl? And who will lead her? Our job is to lead our inner selves. And what's so interesting is that when we do that, our inner self grows in strength back to that inner wisdom, and it leads us. And so we switch that negative cycle of self-criticism and harshness and shutting down, and we flip it so that we're being kind and compassionate, and that feeds our inner wisdom. And then our knowing opens up and we know what to do. I'm going to send you this exercise to your email box, and I hope you'll try it. It's got a lot more detail. I just barely kind of skimmed the surface. I want you to get a visual of it, but I'm going to send it to you, and I hope you'll try it. It's powerful. I believe it'll make a difference in your life, just as I believe all these pillars will make huge differences in your life. At Take Care of Mom, you'll find so much more about these pillars in depth. There are blog posts. There's a ton of free content. So much for you to read about the resiliency system, and I hope you'll go and do that. There's a place for you to sign up for a course that I'm developing and get updates for when that's ready. We're going to go in a deep dive in that direction, and it is going to be awesome. And I hope you'll consider joining me when that's ready. Also, I hope that you'll connect with me on social media so that we can take some of these conversations into a Facebook platform. We can talk about them. You can also find me on Instagram and keep up with these thoughts and be able to think about how you can apply it better in your life. I just want to close by telling you that you need this in your life. You need self-compassion. You need self-awareness. You need to give yourself a chance to be loving and kind to yourself. There is nobody doing any job anywhere that is more important than what you're doing. And it's hard. It's really hard. But it's powerful work, and it's worth it. And you should be able to enjoy your mom life. This should not be a time in your life and my life when I'm mothering where we're just giving away everything we have to other people. This is your life too, and you deserve to enjoy it. I'm so grateful I had the opportunity to be part of this I Am Mom Summit. I'm so excited to look at some of the other presentations, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with me. Bye-bye.